The other night, I stood in my kitchen holding a cracked cup, and for a moment I couldn't remember how long I'd been standing there. It wasn't an expensive cup, I'd had it for years. But as I stared at that thin line running down the side, it hit me harder than I expected. I thought, very quietly, this is what my life looks like now. Nothing shattered, just worn enough that it can't be trusted anymore. I'm 80 years old, or close enough. So at this age, exact numbers stop mattering. What matters is what's left. The house was silent except for the refrigerator humming. One chair at the table, one cup in the sink. I didn't feel dramatic sadness. I felt something heavier than that, like realizing the door has already closed and you didn't hear it shut. I wasn't always alone. I didn't plan to end up like this. I planned carefully, actually. That was always my strength, or what I thought was my strength. I grew up learning how to be careful. My parents didn't sit me down and explain it, but I watched them live it. My father stayed at the same job for decades, even when it made him tired. My mother kept everything steady, quiet, and controlled. There was food on the table, bills got paid. Dreams were something you didn't talk about too loudly. They made people uncomfortable. So I learned early that safety was something you earned by staying in line. Don't ask for too much. Don't risk embarrassment. Don't gamble with your future. That kind of thinking sticks with you. It becomes part of how you breathe. In school, I wasn't the kid teachers worried about. I did my work. I followed rules. I didn't cause trouble. When people asked what I wanted to be, I said things that sounded sensible. I didn't say what I actually thought about late at night, because even then, I didn't trust those thoughts. When I finished school, an opportunity came through, someone my family knew, a steady job. Not exciting, but reliable. I remember the relief on my parents' faces when I told them I'd take it. That relief felt like approval, and approval felt like love. So I told myself I'd made the right choice. I met my wife around that time. She was calm, practical, kind. We didn't have a wild beginning. We talked about plans, not fantasies. We wanted the same things: stability, predictability, a life that didn't surprise us too much. When we married, people said we were sensible together. I liked that word back then. Our life settled into routines quickly. Work during the day, dinner at home, television on in the evenings. Weekends were for errands and family visits. We saved money. We avoided debt. We didn't argue much. From the outside, it probably looked like success. But days that feel safe also feel similar. And when days feel similar, time starts to blur. Years passed without leaving much of a mark. I remember turning 30 and thinking I was still getting started. Then 40 came, and it felt like I'd blinked and missed something. At work, I was dependable. I didn't push for big changes. I didn't take bold steps. I waited my turn. Promotions came slowly, raises too, enough to keep going, never enough to feel excited. I told myself excitement was overrated, that peace was better. Sometimes chances appeared. A position in another city, a chance to lead something new. Each time, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. What if it didn't work out? What if I failed? What if I lost what I already had? So I stayed where I was. Staying felt responsible. We had a child, a curious kid, always asking questions, always wanting to try things. I loved him deeply, but I loved safety more than I realized. When he talked about big ideas, I warned him about consequences. When he took risks, I worried instead of cheering. I thought that was my job as a father. Protect first, encourage later. But later never really came. Our house stayed quiet, not unhappy, just quiet. Meals were eaten at the same times. Conversations stayed practical. We talked about schedules, bills, repairs. Not fears, not hopes. There was always time for that, we thought. Looking back now, I see how carefully we lived, how little space we left for mistakes, and how, without noticing, we were also leaving less space for closeness. That's where this part of my story pauses. Before the losses, before the silence grew heavier, back when everything still looked fine from the outside, and I believed that playing it safe meant I was doing life the right way. Things stayed fine for a long time. That's the strange part. Nothing fell apart right away. When you play it safe, life doesn't punish you loudly. It waits. My wife started getting tired more often. At first, we blamed age, then stress, then work. Doctor visits became part of the routine, like grocery shopping or paying bills. We sat in waiting rooms with old magazines and said very little. I held her coat. She held my hand. Neither of us said what we were thinking. When the diagnosis finally came, it wasn't dramatic. The doctor spoke calmly, too calmly. I nodded and asked practical questions. Treatments, schedules, costs. I was good at that. I always had been. What I didn't know how to do was sit with her fear, or mine. At home, we carried on. I cooked more. I cleaned more. I handled things. At night, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling. I could feel it, even in the dark. But instead of talking, I pretended to sleep. I told myself I was giving her space. The truth is, I didn't know what words to use, and I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Here's something no one tells you. When you avoid discomfort your whole life, even love becomes hard when it asks something risky from you. She got weaker. Our conversations got shorter. Then one morning, she didn't wake up. The house didn't feel broken after she was gone. It felt paused, like someone had stepped out of the room and forgotten to come back. I moved through the days the same way I always had, carefully, quietly. People told me I was handling it well. I believed them. I went back to work because work gave me structure. At home, there was too much silence. I ate, standing up. I slept on one side of the bed. I kept the television on just to hear a voice that wasn't mine. Our son came to visit for the funeral. He hugged me stiffly. We talked about practical things, what to do with her clothes, the paperwork. He stayed a few days, then left. He had a life waiting for him. I told him I understood. After that, our calls became less frequent, not because we didn't care, because neither of us knew how to cross the distance. I waited for him to call. He waited for me. Weeks turned into months, months into years. Retirement arrived without warning. One day I had somewhere to be, the next day I didn't. People shook my hand and thanked me for my service. I brought home a box of things I didn't need anymore. I placed it in the corner and didn't open it for months. That's when the days started stretching. Long mornings, longer evenings. I tried filling the time, but everything felt shallow. Hobbies felt pointless. Television blurred together. Meals tasted the same. I told myself this was just old age. This is what happens. But one afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I found an old notebook. I didn't even remember writing in it. Inside were small things, places I wanted to see, ideas I'd once had. Nothing wild, nothing impossible, just honest thoughts from a younger man who still believed he might try. And that's when it hit me. Another quiet hook, another sharp realization. I didn't lose my life all at once. I gave it away in pieces. Pieces, every time I chose comfort over courage. I sat there for a long time holding that notebook, not crying, just breathing slowly, thinking about how often I'd said, later, how often I'd chosen the sure thing, how often I'd avoided a hard conversation because silence felt safer. I thought about my wife, all the nights I could have spoken, all the times I could have held her closer instead of holding back. I thought about my son and how I taught him caution before I taught him connection. Regret at this age isn't loud. It doesn't scream at you. It sits beside you. It watches you eat alone. It listens when the phone doesn't ring. I still wash one cup most nights. I still set one plate. Sometimes I imagine what it would have been like if I'd taken just a few more chances. not with money or careers, but with people, with words, with being honest about what mattered. Here's the last thing I've learned, and I say it quietly, not as advice, but as a confession. Playing it safe doesn't stop time. It doesn't protect you from loss. It just makes sure that when things do end, you wonder what else could have lived. If there's someone in your life you've been careful with when you should have been open, don't wait as long as I did. Reach out. Even if it feels awkward, even if you don't know what to say something. If this story reminded you of your own life or someone you miss, you can share that in the comments. Maybe your words will reach someone else who needs them. And if you want to hear more stories like this, from people who've lived long enough to see where the quiet mistakes lead, you can subscribe. I'd be glad to have you here.